Welcome to Ladies of Another View on Beck. We are kind of short-staffed today.
It's kind of
Amy and I are here, and of course we have a guest, Pete Hanebutt. And Pete, you are with the North Dakota Farm Bureau.
Correct.
And you've been here before.
I've been here before. I'm the Director of Public Policy for the North Dakota Farm Bureau, and I've been here a few times, yeah.
Awesome. You always bring your insight to the show with very pertinent information, so I do thank you for that.
Kind of you to say.
But today we're going to talk to Pete about waters of the U.S. We're going to talk about the tax bases. We're going to talk about redistricting. And then after that, we're going to talk a little bit about an Ohio mayor who talked to the school board, and he was very upset and said everybody better resign or quit by midnight because there's some stuff going on. And then we're going to save the best for last. It's Constitution Day today.
Yay.
And we should actually start with that. But happy Constitution Day.
Happy Constitution Day.
Happy Constitution Day.
Thank you. Same to you.
And it's also known as U.S. Citizen Day.
Wonderful.
I bet a lot of people didn't know that.
That's something we celebrate, is it?
Exactly.
Something we should.
It is a federal holiday.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll talk about that in our last segment, so stick around. It's going to be a fun show. Pete, welcome to the show again.
Pleasure to be here.
And there's so many things that we need to talk about, but one of the ones on the radar right now, and we thought it was put to bed, but waters of the U.S. Why don't you tell our viewers about that?
Well, it's a sad thing that it's back because during the Obama administration, a reinterpretation of the Clean Water Act was tried, I guess I'll say, and they wanted to say that any water is navigable. That was the thing with the Clean Water Act. Navigable water was included, so if you could make commerce off of it, taking a boat across the river, trading something, whatever it was, that was navigable water. During the Obama administration, their interpretation was that nearly any water in the United States was navigable. So the puddle in the middle of the football field is navigable now. Meaning that the federal government can come into anyone's backyard and claim that the water in their backyard is regulated by the federal government, which means the federal government can regulate almost anything in the United States completely. Maybe not out in some deserts, but the rain does fall in the desert occasionally. So at any rate, it was a way to expand the role of government, to increase regulation, and it was a real problem for America. We were lucky enough in North Dakota, and about half the states joined in a suit to challenge the ruling, and our judge in Fargo ruled on behalf of North Dakotans and like I say, about half the states. And so it was put on hold, and that's where it stayed for quite a little while. And then when the Trump administration came in, they rewrote some rules, made it clear, and it was, people wiped their brow, thought it was dead and buried, and now with the Biden administration, it's come back. And so it's a challenging problem for everyone in America. I hope people realize it's not just agriculture, it's anybody, and the federal government is using this as a hook to get in the door to regulate everyone in America, because there is water everywhere, and if they can regulate the water, that gives them a chance to come into everybody's back door.
You brought up the fact that it doesn't just affect farmers and ranchers.
No.
So as a person who doesn't have a ranch, I know Mary probably definitely understands how this works. But for like myself and some of our viewers that don't have a ranch, how is the waters of the U.S. going to affect us? What do we see? What's the...
If the federal government can regulate all water, no matter what, which is what they're alleging, then it just allows them to regulate local municipalities, for example. If you live in a small town, they're going to be in charge of the drainage system, or could be, theoretically, the drainage system in your small town. So runoff water anywhere is a federal water for them to regulate. Like I said, water on the football field, water in your garden, in your backyard. It gets them into the backyard of every single citizen in America, and that's just how rotten it is. Mm-hmm. And our judge in Fargo saw the foolishness of it and set it aside. And I'm happy that, around half the states joined North Dakota in that, and our Attorney General and our Ag Commissioner did a great job with that. It's surprising that more than half the states didn't, but at any rate, some of them, I guess, were scared to take on the federal government, particularly states in the East Coast. So at any rate, it was held off and put to bed and then nails in the coffin, we thought, during the Trump administration. But as I've said before, There's no bad idea that doesn't resurrect itself in Washington because somebody else loves a bad idea and thinks just with their brains they can make it better. And so it never happens. You can't fix some bad ideas.
So a couple things that I wanted to point out for our viewers. And, when they talk about these mud puddles, the puddle in the backyard, they say, there's no way you can do that. But what the navigable water means is if that water flows into a stream or a creek and eventually gets into a navigable water, then that mud puddle is technically a navigable water.
That connectivity.
The connectivity,
And
right.
that's what they're alleging, that everything gets connected eventually because there is no such thing as water that just soaks in and stays there. It all goes somewhere eventually. Therefore, we can regulate everything eventually.
Sure. And then two other points. There are states in the country right now, and I want to say Colorado is one of them, that you cannot collect rainwater. It's
I was gonna bring that up.
law to collect rainwater because you don't own it. All right. So that's a problem. But a problem for the ranchers, the farmers and ranchers. Say you have cattle grazing and they drink out of that stream. They try to stop you from letting your cattle drink out of that stream. And so they would have jurisdiction over all the water. They would be in control of all the water. So that's why this is such a bad, bad deal.
Turns over 250 years of just common sense history in America, just to grow the government, just to give the government a way into everyone's backyard. It's ridiculous.
It is.
Well, and when they control the water and they can control the food source, it's just bad for America in general. Boy, whew, you got me worked up.
Well, it is easy to get fired up about because these are obviously people who don't care about basic American principles of private property rights, of the idea that, this is my land, this is my castle, and you're not coming here to tell me what to do. And yet they don't care about that at all.
They don't. And when you think about some of the things that the Corps of Engineer has done, just you and I, we live right next door to DAPL, the DAPL protest.
Yep.
And I can't go down and camp overnight on Corps land without permission.
You can't ride a four-wheeler across Corps land to go ice fishing.
No.
Nope.
And you cannot, but you can go ahead and protest for about 9 months and sit in squalor on Corps land. So that's the sad part.
And leave an environmental nightmare of all the trash, and yet they were supposed to be doing it to be saving the environment. So it's just sad hypocrisy, and you can't fix it.
Right, right. Ugh, wow. So if there's any way to step up, what should our viewers do?
Well, I think it's important for everybody to let our delegation know what a bad idea this is. I wouldn't want to speak for them, but I'm fairly certain that our delegation, Congressman Armstrong and the two senators, know that this is a really bad idea for North Dakota. And so people are rallying around that. But unfortunately, the current administration in Washington, their allies in Congress, the administration and congressional leaders on the other side, don't really care what happens in flyover country, and they'll just flat out tell you that. If you're a red state, we've got a target on our back. In North Dakota, everything that we do well, it seems like the Biden administration hates. We do oil well. We do energy of all sorts well. We raise cattle well. They don't like any of those things.
Right, right. Boy, but yet they'll sell land to China.
Absolutely.
That's, you guys, we got to stay on top of this, so contact your senators and the congressmen. We have to stay on top of it. Once they control the water, they control all of us. Oh, we got other things to talk about. I'm so glad you came on a Friday, I tell you what. But we'll be right back after this on Ladies of Another View on Beck. Welcome back to Ladies of Another View on Beck. Amy and I are having the liveliest discussion with Pete Hanebutt with the North Dakota Farm Bureau. You always bring us good information, but sometimes it's frustrating information.
I'm sure it is. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but sometimes you got to ring the bell and let people know,
And that's
things are
what
on
we're
fire.
here for,
Yeah.
absolutely, because all of this information is so important to save America. It just really is. But now let's talk a little bit, or change gears to the tax bases. Tell us about that. What's going on?
Estate taxes and inheritance taxes are always a challenge for people in agriculture. A lot of people that are independent business people, not just agriculture. If you have a small business and you want it to go to your children someday, you build a business up, regardless of what kind. You build a business up and you want your kids to take it over and have a multi-generational family business. And unfortunately, with estate taxes and the stepped up basis that the Biden administration is targeting now, that is a way of stealing that generational business away from people. And so I think a lot of people understand this concept. If my father and I are farming together, and he's been farming since 1960, he passes away, I am paying the tax on the value of all the property things, all the things, whatever it is that's equity, according to what it is at today's, at the price today, on that stepped up basis from not the equity, from every year, but what it is today. And so by having that higher number to write off, then it lowers your exposure of estate taxes to pay. It's not from when Dad started the thing. It's from when we were farming together and he died at that price level, I guess you'd say, for all the equity. That's what the taxes are based on. And so it's not the difference in between, it's that fair market value at that time. So by having it at that number, your exposure for taxes is much less because it's not the built up equity. So by attacking this and wanting to take this away, the Biden administration is really assaulting multi-generational family businesses, regardless of what kind. It's been tried before, I think, in my recollection, in the mid 70s or maybe I'd say late 70s, thinking about spending that happened with Jimmy Carter. Certainly it happened in the 80s and in the 90s. Each time Congress has realized this is really going to be bad for business in America, regardless of what kind. This is going to halt generational businesses from turning over and going to the next generation. And they've seen, cooler heads have prevailed. Well, with this bunch that's in Washington now, that doesn't matter because they want to assault family businesses, especially multi-generational businesses. So they want everybody to start over poor at the beginning again, it seems like. And the sad thing is, Vilsack, the Secretary of Agriculture, knows better. He's from farm country. He should know better. He's been around throughout this. He's been in politics a long time. And yet, because he's being a good soldier for the president, he's just jumped all over this and continues to say things in the press that are nonsensical. And it's very insulting that an administration in Washington that says they're all about the young farmer and they're all about the next generation wants to rob from them before they even get started. And so it's a real problem for America right now, any kind of business. And so, it's in the news a lot right now. Congress is debating it. It's another thing where I'm sure that our delegation, Senator Kramer, Senator Hoeven, and Congressman Armstrong know full well how bad this is for America. And we hope that cooler heads will prevail in Washington, but there's no guarantee because cooler heads don't necessarily have the majority right now. So it's a sad thing for multi-generational businesses.
Absolutely. We were talking about the waters of the U.S. You've got the 30 by 30, land grab. So they're trying to control the water. They're trying to take land and establish it. Now they're trying to tax generational farmers. It almost feels like they are, the main agenda is to drive out personal business, personal farms, drive everybody to the populated areas, kill rural America, because rural America are the ones that you can't control because we have free-thinking minds and we know
common sense.
Right, we have common sense, but it's a huge attack on the beef industry first and foremost. I think they've pretty much commercialized the chicken industry.
Pork.
And pork, yeah, pork
Can't
is
buy
not,
a pig anywhere. I mean,
nope, and pork is owned by China now, our largest pork producer. So do you feel that this is another tiny little needle under the fingernail to drive out rural Americans and farmers?
I think it's pretty obvious. Nancy Pelosi was quoted as saying capitalism has not been good for America basically today. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, don't mean to put words in her mouth, not that I would want to, but she says that capitalism has not been good for America, so she obviously believes more in a socialist model. A socialist model where the government controls everything, and that's what she wants to see America go to. It's worked pretty well for 150 years or 250 years in America. Maybe not so much in the last few years since World War II with the baby boom and how everyone's spoiled and gets everything they want. But the rugged individualism that Reagan talked about, the personal responsibility, the working hard to achieve, that's all going out the window because the government's going to provide for you. They proved during this COVID alleged crisis that we'll just give you money to do whatever you want. And it's a sad case in America, but things are looking not so good. And it doesn't matter how good of Christians we want to be to teach a person to fish. The Democrats have figured out that we can rally people so that they'll vote for free fish instead of fishing poles, and that means that the canoe's turned over and things have just gone to pot.
Well, and the sad thing is half the country, say they are low income. Maybe these stimulus packages are more than what they've ever had, but those are the people that are starting to vote, or I shouldn't say starting to vote. Those are the ballots that come in. Mm-hmm. How they get there that's up for another discussion. Mm-hmm. But it's like, they're doing well. They don't understand that eventually you run out of other people's money. I want to say Margaret Thatcher said
that, yes.
Yeah, the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money. And it's like they don't see that side of it. They're saying, oh my gosh, I just got this stimulus check. I just got cable. It's like they don't have the foresight to see out in the future. What's it going to be like in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now?
And eventually our country turns into Greece, where they ran out of everybody else's money and they had riots and everything. We've had riots. And so it's just a sad state of affairs that the ideals that made America great have been abandoned for some kind of utopia that is just the government provides for you and you become the nanny state. It's very pathetic.
And honestly, if the government did take over all the farming, ranching, cattle industry, they would be the ones making the profit, but then they also get to determine what trickles down to the peasants.
Well, and they do such a good job of managing anything else. Name something the government does well, and why would we want them in charge of our food supply? I mean, they're not supposed to do things well, and they certainly prove it every day. The only thing the government's out there for is to protect us from foreign invasion, which this crowd doesn't seem to even care about that, and just a few other things. Otherwise, it should be the free economy, the capitalist profit-driven economy that drives things in America, and not under this group. They just want to be in charge of everything.
Wow, boy, scary times. And again, contact your legislators. It's the only way to get things done. You have got to get a voice. You've got to get up there, stand up, speak out. It's the only way we're going to make change.
Yeah.
I'm afraid of what's to come. I just really am. We're in some really transitional dark times right now, and if we don't put an end to it now, it's not going to get any better. But we have more to talk about after this. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after this on Ladies of Another View on Beck.
Oh, we get to talk.
Welcome back to Ladies of Another View on Beck. And a dude today. We can't leave our dudes out. Trent Luce, you know Trent a little bit. Okay, he wanted to change the name Ladies and a Dude. So you fit that spot today.
There we go.
Thank
Happy
you.
to fill in as a dude.
There you go. Well, some days it's questionable, you can't ask anymore, heaven forbid.
I'll go in the dude category every time.
There you go, thank you. So we're going to talk a little bit about the redistricting. Tell us why that's important.
Well, it's important to everybody in America, but it's particularly important to rural folks because, every 10 years there's a census. That was something designed in our Constitution from the beginning of our government so that we have apportioned representation. It doesn't matter congressionally for North Dakota because we're a single congressional district state, but our legislature also redistricts. And so we go through a process it's a very open process in North Dakota, which I think is a huge blessing, where we try to make sure that, we know what the population is. You divide it by 47, which is the number of districts we have in this state, and it's likely to stay 47. You divide that number, you come up with a base number of how many people need to live in every district, and then you try to fit the map to make sure that people are well represented. We have a wonderful committee doing that right now. They're very conscientious people, and rural North Dakota is represented well on this committee. I was at one of the hearings yesterday, and they're going through some preliminary discussions about what the map may look like. Some districts may grow, some districts may shrink, some places may get a new district. You squeeze the balloon on one end, it pops out on the other end. It's very interesting to watch. It's part of the process for political junkies, and so for that it's great. And so some of us may keep the representatives and senators we have currently. The district might just change shapes. Some of us may get a completely new senator or a new representative, just depending on how populations have changed. We know that the Fargo area has grown substantially, and so they will get a new district, but we also know Western North Dakota has grown, and so the Williston, Watford City area will get a new district out that way somewhere, depending on how the horse trading goes. We know the numbers are out there on both sides of the state. The center of the state has not grown as much, and so some of the big districts will remain big districts, but we also have some districts now that are at least as big as New Hampshire, bigger than New Jersey, bigger than a lot of states. And so we have some very large districts. And so the balance is, are those people fairly represented when their senator or their representatives have to cover, say, 6 counties versus, someone who covers 6 square miles maybe in an inner city district. And so it's hard to wrap your hands around all those numbers and everything all the time, but it is part of our process, and eventually the dust will settle, and I'm confident that rural North Dakota will be well represented in the next legislature, and it's an interesting process to watch. It is one of the things that makes America great.
So then, are they going to add the 2 more districts? Because it was like some plans were just to reorg the districts.
Right.
But there's also plans to add 2 more
Well,
districts.
add 2, but some will go away in that process.
Oh, I see.
There's one in the northeast, north central, I guess you'd say, part of the state that will get absorbed. It just so happens that those legislators there are planning to retire, and so they'll take that district off the map and combine those parts into other districts, and that will probably happen somewhere else. And so by the time some quote-unquote current districts are absorbed into what will be future districts, the number of districts will stay the same, probably.
Okay.
There have been proposals to increase the number. There's always proposals to decrease the numbers. And so I think we'll probably stay at that number that we're at now, certainly less than 50 districts. And we'll just see how it shakes out for the number of thousands of people that need to be in each district to make sure that communities of interest are kept together. And the committee has mentioned that multiple times: keep communities of interest together, try to keep counties together as much as possible so that units of government are similar. There may be cases where a municipality is right on the county line, or a school district is evenly split across county lines, where they keep that together as a community of interest. But the committee is working through all this, and they hammer it out in a pretty straightforward, logical way so everybody feels comfortable with it. Eventually we'll get good districts, and we'll live with them for the next 10 years until the next apportionment. Part of America.
Part of America. Well, so then they also, one of the concerns, though, if they added districts and made it 49 instead of 47, is some of those districts would come on the more populated state, or part of the state. Let's just be honest, it does touch Minnesota, and I'm nothing against Minnesota, because I know it's the metro areas that are the very liberal voters. But anyway, our eastern part of the state is getting pretty liberal. And so that'd be almost dangerous if we added 2 more districts
You
over
hate
there.
you hate to start giving folks who don't think like we might here in central North Dakota, you hate to give extra votes to folks who don't think like we do. I came from a state where the big cities and folks from those areas controlled everything in the legislature. I can tell you it wasn't good for rural Indiana when I was there. We had big districts, and yet the legislature was controlled by folks representing basically the 3 biggest counties in the state. And those biggest counties had more votes or more people in the legislature than a lot of the other counties combined. And so you got everything that was good for them, and what was good for rural Indiana didn't matter. And so we don't want to see that happen here. And I don't think it will, because we have very conscientious legislators here, people who are not as many generations away from the farm as they were there. And so people here still have a connection to farm and ranch communities, whether it's their grandparents or not. I feel very comfortable for my working lifetime that it'll be good here, and hope it's a long time before that changes. Obviously, some of those metro areas grow, but we also have seen a great growth of people in the Williston area, or I'll just say the Bakken. And even those folks, they may not have a connection to agriculture, but they enjoy the rural lifestyle that they have in Williams County or in McKenzie County, and so that's good for those of us in other rural counties.
And I want to say too, I had heard that they're going to, if you have a reservation in your district, they're going to add a delegation from the reservation too? Is anything
There was
come of that?
discussion about how folks on the reservation are fairly represented. And the other thing that has been traditionally done here is you never split a reservation, so you keep that voting block together. Realistically, though, none of those folks have a voting mass that is approaching half of what the district would need to be. And so is it fair that the other half of the district only gets one vote? That's not fair either. And so there's no way to do it if you're of the ilk that you think that you can only be represented by this person, then maybe that's a little misguided, and you should think that anyone can represent you well.
Sure.
I mean, for example, silly, but for example, I'm German, I'm Missouri Synod Lutheran. I don't demand that I have someone who believes exactly the same way I do and has the same ethnic heritage as I do. And so it wouldn't be fitting to say that. So, is it fair to say that I can only be represented by a Native American if I am of that family,
Yeah. And there's a lot of conservatives on the reservation. I work down at Standing Rock, and a lot of people are just afraid to speak up.
Sure.
You know.
And it's a concern for them, I know, and it's a legitimate concern, but you also have to understand the voting block of an entire district. It's just not what people in New Salem think. It's what everybody in Morton County thinks. It's not just what people in one community think. It's the entire community
Sure.
within a district.
Right.
And so, that is the horse trading that goes on, and I'm not always in the majority, I'm not always in the minority. But, that is part of what makes America great, in that we look out for one another as a collective group.
Yes.
In a legislative way. And we're a republic, we're not a strict democracy, because that's mob rule sometimes. And so we're a republic. We elect people to represent us as a group. And so that's part of what is the backbone of America, and I hope that we get this figured out in the right way.
Great. Now we have less than a minute left. Leave us with something positive.
Well, the grumpy factor has gone down since it started raining in western North
Right.
Dakota. And there are places that didn't have rain all through, from the spring until August, and now we've had some rain. Things are greening up, things are looking better. I think it gives people a positive feeling toward next year. We get through this winter, we start over, we hit the reset button. I think people are feeling very positive about going forward. You have to be optimistic in agriculture. You'd never get into this field because you're betting on the grace of God to give you the rain and whatever else. And so I think that people are looking forward to next year being better. You're always going to have a bad year. My grandfather had one in the 30s. A lot of people's grandfathers did. But it got better after that. And so these things cycle.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. You always have such great information to share.
Thanks for having me on.